Jai Baba. So, Ashok, do you want to start?
Yeah. Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai. How to love God. To love God in the most practical way is to love our fellow beings. If we feel for others in the same way as we feel for our dear ones, we love God. 1. If instead of seeing faults in others, we look within ourselves, we are loving God. 2. If instead of robbing others to help ourselves, we rob ourselves to help others, we are loving God. 3. If we suffer in the suffering of others and feel happy in the happiness of others, we are loving God. 4. If instead of worrying over our own misfortunes, we think of ourselves more fortunate than many, many others, we are loving God. 5. If we endure a lot with patience and contentment, accepting it as His will, we are loving God. 6. If we understand and feel that the greatest act of devotion and worship to God is not to hurt or harm any of His beings, we are loving God. 7. To love God as He ought to be loved, we must live for God and die for God, knowing that the goal of all life is to love God and find Him as our own self. By Meher Baba, Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai.
Jai Baba.
Over to you, Karthik. Yes.
Yeah, so Jai Baba, we can start with the reading. We were at page 111. Um, Gems in the Making is the section that we are continuing from. Any thoughts before we start? Any comments? No?
Yeah,
So,
maybe post our reading, 9 o'clock comments. Yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
sure.
yeah. Yeah.
Jai Baba. So, anybody wants to start reading? Ashok, you want to go first?
Yeah, okay.
Please.
Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai. Gems in the making. Just as there is nothing of the ascetic in the makeup of Baba's men, so is there nothing of the sacrosanct atmosphere in this in his ashrams. Normally, normality and loving kindness characterize both. Though all of his Indian men have been subjected to the strictest of disciplines, its effect has not been to remove them from the world, nor to foster them in any illusions of being set apart from other men. The renunciation in which Baba has trained them is an inner thing and manifests itself in the detachment from possessions from and people, from both the luxury and poverty of this world. When they are in the West, they adjust themselves with ease to our modern gadgets and trappings without being unduly impressed by our boasted civilization. And when they return to India, where modern conveniences are only for Maharajas and high ranking Britishers, they again adapt themselves happily to that life. They seem to have achieved that state of mind of which Baba speaks when he says, make use of modern civilization when and where necessary, but do not let it dominate you. Neither despise it nor be driven by it. As living examples of selfless workers, it would be difficult to find their equals, to find gathered so many strong, stalwart men so astonishingly free from egocentric speech and action. Doubtless, when they first became associated with Baba, they were just as raw, just as unintegrated as the majority of us. Undoubtedly, in the early days, their personal desires and weaknesses were vocally apparent, since Baba's technique of training is not one of repression. But having lived among them for some time, I can testify to the high degree of maturity which they now possess. I just wanted to add, he's saying that he's again stressing the point that Baba has said that we should not be moved by material, materiality and material things and illusions. Very well put.
Yeah, I was just thinking of something. So, where does things like creature comforts and things like technology fall, right? So, we are also used to so many conveniences. So, where does one draw the line, right? So, where does one draw the line of being able to not be dependent on them? So, it's a tough one.
No,
So,
Karthik,
what my father's generation would have seen as unnecessary, we have taken for granted in this generation, right? And so on and so forth. Go ahead.
so sorry, I interrupted. I'm just saying we had read about science and religion, the place of science, in our earlier reads.
Correct.
So I would say that we take technology as it comes, and if it's not in, uh, if it's not in any sort of opposition to religion or spiritual beliefs, it's okay if it's making our life better. I mean, as long as it's doing good, I think it's okay. I mean, that's my personal.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's correct. That's Baba's message also is like that. But see, ultimately as individuals, we need to get that understanding where to draw the line. WhatsApp is good, but how much time do you spend on WhatsApp talking to people or Facebook or that kind of social media? So half an hour is good, or even 2 hours is good. Is very individualistic call,
Yeah.
and one needs to meditate upon this and see what benefit it is you are actually driving. Definitely, it is giving benefit, but it's also eating away a lot of your lifetime. So that, it's very
Yeah,
challenging.
yeah.
Huh?
Good,
You said,
good, good, good,
yeah,
good comment.
yeah,
It's not easy to
yeah.
make that judgment, but one has to apply the principle of intelligent action and
Yes, yes,
assess and make their own
yes,
decision.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
absolutely brilliant points
Maybe
by both of you.
maybe the simple questions could be: is it adding value to me, or am I adding value to others? That's one. Or I'm able to use it for my benefit or societal benefit in terms of spiritual growth. If we apply that principle, probably a lot of clutter will go away that we usually get indulged I mean usually indulge in.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. Correct.
Yeah,
so,
many
so
of
that
this is very interesting information about the world, about a bird who's making a huge dive into sea and picking up a fish. So they are very interesting facts of the creation, so we get to share all that on WhatsApp or Facebook or whatever. But beyond this, what actually? So that question is always tough to answer. Yeah, yeah, Baba.
I think the answer lies in the different strokes for different folks, but and also excess of anything is bad. So I think we should have a balance in life, and that would be one way of going ahead.
Yes.
Yes, let's proceed. Yeah.
Yeah, we can continue, please.
Yeah, illustrating this.
No, previous
Sorry,
paragraph, miracles.
sorry, yeah, miracles. Another criticism directed at Baba is that he does not perform the miracles which the average man expects from a master. Because he does not stun people's reason with miraculous claptrap, little minds fail to recognize his power and wisdom. Illustrating this and also Baba's attitude towards miracle seekers is the story of one of Baba's boyhood school friends who came to see him one day. The young man had heard of the role of the master which Baba now occupied, but was puzzled as to how a boy with whom a few years ago he had played pranks and cricket, could now be in such an exalted position. He told Baba that he would like to believe that he was God realized, but the old familiarity between them seemed to block the way. If only Baba would do something unusual, something miraculous, he said, then he was sure he could believe in him. So Baba told him to go to a table and write down certain things. As the man did this, the ink started to lift from the table. Then the pen began to move in his hand. The young man was terrified and ran over to Baba and prostrated himself at his feet, crying, "Forgive me, master, now I believe." Baba looked at him with pity. "If you are impressed with this gaudy show, you'd better go and serve X," meaning the name of the famous juggler in India.
Mentioning
Uh,
the name.
Mentioning, sorry, the name of the famous juggler in India. At another time, when a new disciple suggested to Baba that he demonstrate his miraculous powers by causing a large building to be erected within a few minutes, Baba replied that no God realized person would consider performing such a miracle. It would be childish and its effect would be just the reverse of what you would expect to be. You think the hundreds of thousands of people who come to me and live spiritual lives, certainly there would be no limit in the scores of people who would be attracted to me. But almost all of them would be worldly minded and would ask me to gratify their materialistic desires. There is no need of money. Those in need of money would say, "You erected this building in a few minutes. Why can't you miraculously produce a few $1,000 for me?" And even those with the potentialities for a life of renunciation on hearing of such a miracle would ask me to relieve them from all their troubles and effect their spiritual salvation at once. This world is an illusion. Therefore, as a rule, God realized persons do not perform great public miracles which are displays of the Master's power to create further illusion, except during an avataric period when the one who plays the role of avatar has to perform such miracles as raising the dead and restoring the sight to the blind in order to stimulate the apathic masses to quicken their wonder. The miracle of the miracle of helping those in sorrow and sickness has, however, often been performed by Baba, whose love goes forth continuing to those in need. Many of his devotees, both in the East and the West, have experienced this. Once, while the master was in Persia, the child of a Parsi couple in Bombay, loyal devotees of Baba, was suddenly stricken ill. The child's condition grew worse from day to day. Night and day, the parents implored Baba inwardly to save their child. Then one night, when the child's condition was so critical that they had about given up hope for his recovery, Baba appeared, apparently in his physical body, passed his hands over the body of the child, and instantly disappeared. From that moment, the child began to improve and was shortly restored to perfect health. A few months later, when the master returned to India, one of the disciples asked him how such a thing could occur. Since Baba seldom reveals his hand by explaining any occult technique which he may have occasion to use, all the disciple learned was that it was quite a simple matter for the master to be in one place and appear at another, thousands of miles away. Jesus, Baba told the disciple, once appeared in 12 different places at one and the same time in what seemed to be his physical body, but was in reality a subtle body. Does anybody want to comment or say anything? There's
No.
also the widely known story. Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
There's
Continue.
also the widely known story of the Comte de Saint Germain appearing simultaneously at the six gates of Paris at the time of French Revolution in a form which appeared to be physical. However, the only miracle with which the God realized master is really concerned is that of releasing the individual soul from its binding karmic impressions through divine love. These imprints upon the soul of thought, emotion, or action are not merely those which are conscious of having acquired. Many of these conscious effects of ego experience can be wiped out through such an upheaval as religious conversion, but for the hidden unconscious limitations, the individual requires the help of a master of consciousness such as Baba is. The best of modern psychotherapists can do much in this respect, but unless they are themselves free from ego sensitivity and can function in unobstructed pipelines to the reservoir of God, they cannot effect for the individual any complete and permanent release. Moreover, the individual must also be freed from his virtuous impressions. Here again, a spiritual master is needed to lead man through and beyond his hard earned virtues. So basically, the grace of the perfect master is again, you know, impressed upon, is what I think of uh,
Yeah.
freeing the soul. It is at this point that many people fall. We are, for the most part, willing to have wiped out cause and effect of what we will call sin or evil, but to have our virtues eliminated is quite a different matter. Yet, since all egocentric impressions must eventually be balanced so that they automatically cancel each other, the perfect master leads the soul, which surrenders itself to his guidance, to the recognition that all earth experience is illusory. We must lose our sense of the separate I or ego as the experiencer, for as long as the little I remains, there inevitably creep in subtle forms of pride, which often mask themselves as virtue or spiritual attainment. It is this condition of which Jesus said we must be aware. When he told the story of the seven other devils, more vicious than the first, who try to gain entrance into the newly granted house, that is after the conscious sins have been stripped out. What are these seven uh, houses or what is it? Seven.
Seven other devils.
Yes.
Must be some biblical reference and some house. Yeah. I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay. Avatar. The only certain method of release from these millions of binding impressions, sanskaras, is through the activity of divine love in the soul, which the master awakens or intensifies. A, a love which is forgetful of self and thinks only of the beloved. Did I hear something? Sorry. To be
No,
sure,
no.
the longing for the divine union with which this love induces makes an impression upon the mind too. It also binds, but it binds the soul to God, who eventually frees it. Karthik, just allow me. I'm reminded of that chapter on love, and there is this transition from physical love to divine love on a scale of 0 to 1.
Yeah. I'm not sure which book are you referring to?
This is discourses,
Oh yeah, correct.
just for the cross reference. That's all.
Yes, yes, yes.
Eliminating the ego. Baba explains that these imprints upon the mind of man originated at the moment when the individual drop in order to gain self consciousness emerged from the creator point of the infinite ocean of truth. With that drops unfolding evolution, The sanskaras necessarily increase until in man the soul is literally encased by them. Whether in a physical body or out of it, the individual soul is enveloped by these mental and emotional barnacles, and not until they are dissolved by the grace of an incarnate master can the soul become conscious of his divine essence. God realization, therefore, is the balancing or mutual cancellation of all impressions and tendencies, good and bad, a condition in which the mind is at calm as a still lake. Only when there is something for the mind to focus its attention upon does an intuitive knowing replace the thinking process. Aurobindo Ghosh, a contemporary saint in India, well describes the state of mind when we have passed beyond thinkings, then we shall have knowledge. Reason was the helper, reason is the bar. Transform reason into ordered intuition. Let all thyself be light. This is thy goal. You may want to highlight that part which Aurobindo said. Uh,
Yeah, sure. You can continue.
I'll continue. Sorry, what
Yeah,
did
yeah,
you
please.
say?
Yeah, please continue.
Such a condition is naturally very difficult to achieve. If the mind tries to stop thinking, tends towards the sound sleep state, that is the unconscious. Even the greatest yogis are unable to attain this quiescent state of mind permanently. At best, they induce it themselves. They induce in themselves periods of samadhi during which the mind activity is in abeyance. But when they return to normal consciousness, their mental processes begin again, and the egoistic store of binding impressions is. To go in and out of samadhi, Baba says, is like yielding to the drug habit. It only makes the soul crave for it more and more, and affects nothing stable in the sum total of consciousness. It is an evidence that one is still bound by the activity of the mind, even though on a high level, not to lose consciousness, but to become conscious of the unconscious is the goal. Egoism, egoism, in the sense which Baba uses it, means not merely to be selfish and self opinionated. To be conscious of our separate existence in any way is egoism. Such a slight thing as recalling that we did not sleep well last night is egoism. So too is any feeling of self concern. Hydra headed though ego is, in its main branches are four: the craving, which arises from the gratification of passion or desire, fear, anger, and greed. Of the various techniques,
So I have a question here. What is fear and ego? How is the ego branch represented as fear? I'm just thinking. Desire is an aspect of ego, very clear. Craving, yes. Anger, yes, because I have the self and it's self and so on. Greed, very obvious. What is fear? So
actually,
fear is, yeah,
I mean, you please carry on, carry on.
yeah. So that's the question. That's
Fear actually is an imagination.
Yeah.
It, it's something which is imaginary.
okay.
And fear is also a reflection of speculative ego that we are, uh, you know, somebody may do any harm to us or that kind of thing. It's also in a sense that we are not trusting enough on him. That also leads us to fear.
Yeah, I
So
think
our
creative.
lack of faith, yeah, lack of faith or lack of trust in him is also resulting in fear.
I think you put it rightly. I agree. The starting or the initiation of fear is from the acknowledgement or recognition of separative existence, which is the root of ego, right? So you start recognizing that you are different, and then you create an emotion that would put you at risk against others, or put you at disadvantage, and that fear grows on. Yes, agreed.
Uh, Karthik,
Yeah.
allow me. I have a small acronym. FEAR. False expectations appearing real. This is on a very simplistic term or simplistic way of putting fear.
False expectations appearing
Appear
real.
real.
But that sounds like Baba's principle of Maya.
Well, I don't know. Maybe Baba inspired me this. Uh, Maybe
Put
Baba.
it on the Trello box under Ashok's acronyms.
Yes.
We have a folder there for you,
Yes,
Ashokji.
yes,
I
yes.
think you should yourself add it.
I, I'm inspired by this group and especially Dr. Kama.
Dr. Kava. Of course, he's missing in action. Okay.
Enlighten one's job is to enlighten others. So Ashok practice
Yes,
is getting enlightened.
yes, yes, yes. We can rotate the reading as well. So if anybody wants to read and is ready, can take over from um,
Yeah.
the four
Absolutely.
branches.
Let me read at least a couple of pages. Yeah. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Of the various techniques suitable for the Western man or woman, which can be used to weaken the ego, the most spiritual of the psychotherapeutic methods are among the best. The self facing and subsequent self knowledge, which psychological analysis engenders, does much to clear the ground for deeper soul experience. Any genuine clarification of consciousness, whether through analysis or through religious conversation, helps to liberate the individual from the more blatant forms of egoism. However, the confession of consciously recognized sins takes care only of the more obvious shortcomings. The root, which are the real source of our egoism, is lies lie deeply embedded in the unconscious, cleverly intertwined with that part of ourselves which we value most. If creative thought is our highest value, the roots of the ego may be found buried in the intellect. If feeling is our dominant characteristic, then we may expect to find the straggling roots in the emotional nature. To, disin- dus- to disentangle these roots of egoism from the real self is a major operation, demanding the utmost skill and insight into the deepest caverns of of consciousness.
Of consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah, caverns of consciousness, an operation to be performed by a spiritual master who knows not only how to disintegrate the false personality, but at the same time, how to release the true self. Wow, it's so beautiful it is.
Yeah.
I mean, the surface part is easy to control. I mean, that's what it is saying, which is expressions of ego that you can work upon. But what lies deep within, only a master can remove. Is the prarabdha sanskaras resulting into egoistic actions. Only master can work. This is beyond your own control. You have to
Correct.
make yourself worthy of that. Yeah. Perhaps There are only a few in any age whose intensity of spirit compels them to seek that final annihilation of ego, which shall make them conscious of their own godhood. But for these few, we have the Master's word that when a soul is ready for such a step, wherever the individual may be, whatever his circumstances, the means are provided for him to make contact with a perfect master in the flesh. So definite is Baba on this point that he says God himself would take on temporary embodiment in order to give liberation to soul which has earned it, which has earned it. Whenever the yearning of the soul for God reaches its climax, God finds a way to satisfy its need. Jai Baba. One outstanding example of this, known to many Western devotees of the spiritual life, is the story of Saint Francis of Assisi. According to Baba, the vision of the seraph and the conferring of the stigmata was Saint Francis' initiation into the final phase of the spiritual path, God realization. And because no master was in flesh in that part of the world at that time, Christ himself took form of seraph and drew his beloved servant across the great divide which separates the finite from the infinite, the human from the divine.
Again, biblical references. Do you want to look it up?
That's a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah. So especially
Basically, he
given that.
himself, Khada hai haath pasar, it comes into one Madhusudan bhajan,
Mhm.
that he is waiting with open arms for you. And in the text also we say once we are ready, that we have made ourselves worthy of that, he will come and pick you up. So,
Mm,
but the
mm.
effort has to be ours of unlocking ourselves, and make
Correct.
ourselves worthy. That's the message. I would leave this because this thought will get dispersed
I know. Correct.
in the history. So I would maybe we can just do it of our own.
Offline and individually.
Yeah, individually.
Please, let's
Chapter
continue
4.
to chapter 4, death.
Yeah. In February 1926, Baba received word of the sudden death of his elder brother Jamshed. Baba immediately called the Mandali together and had the telegram read to them. Only a few days before, Jamshed had been moving among them normally and cheerfully. He was a favorite of all the disciples, and his sudden passing distressed them. Baba, however, undisturbed by the news, spoke of it in a most matter of fact way. When he asked the disciples if they felt grief, they all replied in the affirmation. Baba then used the occasion to point out the falsity of their attitude. But persisted one of them, was he not your brother? And is he not dead? He was indeed my brother, but only his body is dead. He is resting within myself. How? Asked the another of the group. Are we yet to know that? By believing one who knows the secrets of life and death. Baba admonished. In reply to other questions from the disciples, the master pointed out that death is common in all, to all. It is a necessary step in the progression of the soul, which merely changes into a new abode. Thus, death means nothing more than changing your coat. Death may be compared to sleep, but the difference between death and sleep is that after death, one wakes up again in a new body. People do not go into hysterics because a loved one goes to sleep, but the simple reason that they know the sleeping one will awaken again. The same attitude should prevail in regard to death. Death is but a longer sleep, with a so called dead one waking up sooner or later in a new body. Yes, what are the expressions we hear from the friends and relatives
Yet.
after a soul gives up? Yet, what are the expressions we hear from the friends and relatives after a soul gives up its earthly body? My beloved father is dead. Where is my sweetheart? My provider has been taken. In spite of a great display of grief and pain in the house of death, it is not the uppermost thought. Is it not the uppermost thought, the my and mine, rather than the welfare of the one who has gone? Every day, I see hundreds of thousands of my brothers dying without feeling distressed by it. Why should my brother in the flesh be an exception? Death is an unavoidable fact of life, and to weep over it is either madness or selfishness. Unfortunately, Jamshed is not really dead. If he were dead in the true sense, dead to all consciousness of separate existence, then you should rejoice, since that would mean he truly lives, because he would then be conscious of being one with God. Though I move about among you, playing with you, eating with you, doing all that so called living man does, I'm really dead. I'm living in the true sense, because in the true sense, I am dead. Die, all of you, in the real sense, so that you may live eternally. The Master would have his disciples die daily, like St. Paul, so that with him they might say, from me to life, to live in Christ. Nevertheless, not I live, but Christ lived in me. The Baba lifts the whole of life and death into the realm of spiritual beauty has been brought to my attention through an account just received from India of a ceremony commemorating the passing of some Indian men disciples. At the bottom of the hill at the Mirabar, a small grave was dug, and it and in it was placed the remains of Masa, Baba's beloved old uncle, who had just died. Chanji's death and burial having occurred in Kashmir, his bedding roll was lowered into the grave. Then, as the disciple Adi read a message from Baba, the Master, looking particularly radiant and beautiful, dropped rows after rows into the grave as the names of Chanji, Masa, and other deceased disciples were read aloud. My correspondent writes that it was the only funeral ceremony which she had ever attended in which death was robbed of all its sting, sadness by replaced by joy, which they all felt as they remembered those who had lived and died in the Master's service. I think this is the memorial tower event just mentioned.
Yes, yes, yes. But I thought it was only Chanji's bed that was lowered there. It looks like Masa as well.
Yeah, yeah. And others also who had died previously. they were.
No, no, but I thought symbolically,
Yeah,
I mean, the names were read out,
yes,
but
yes.
I thought it was only Baba Chandji's bedroll, but I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Everybody else's name was read out. So, and Baba
Yes,
had put a flower
for
in the
each.
person's each of them. Yeah.
Correct.
I'm
For many
reminded
of
of
the
two
disciples,
references. Sorry.
Yeah,
yeah,
sure.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, yeah. Uh, I'm reminded of two references when this came up. Maybe inspired by memory. So it's Listen Humanity, Chapter 1, Death and Immortality, and Chapter 2, Cycles of Sleep and Waking, and also Supplement 19 of the God Speaks on real birth and real death. So
Beautiful.
I think that one page is really in the God Speaks. It says it all, just for reference.
Sure.
Because it's too large
yeah,
to read out parts of chapter 1 and chapter 2. In fact,
Yeah, yes.
my suggestion is that we should revisit um, at least the second part of Listen Humanity.
Sure.
Jai Baba.
Okay.
yeah.
Let's continue. Yeah. Uh, can you read a couple of more
Yes.
pages, or do you want to wrap up?
Yeah. I don't know how many pages are there in this chapter.
No, no, no.
If one
We
was
can we can rotate anytime.
uh,
I'm just asking because you said
yeah,
a couple of
I'll tell
pages.
you.
Yeah, sure. Go
Okay.
ahead.
For many of the disciples in the early days, Jamshed's passing was their first experience of the death of a loved one, and it accordingly stimulated in them many questions which Baba elucidated for them. In sound sleep, there is consciousness but no ego, while in the state of death, there is consciousness plus ego. After the death of a physical body, the soul remains together with the limited ego. The mind and the subtle body, limited ego, the mind and the subtle body. Only the outer garment has been left behind. From 1 to 3 days, the subtle remains is connection with the gross body in a thread like link, but never longer than that, Baba explained. So that is why after 4 days, there is no point praying for the soul, even for the soul. So
Correct.
this is an important thing. Which that is why we have concept of that Chautha, the fourth day ceremony. So beyond
Hmm.
after that, it is understood that the soul has already taken its form,
Moved on.
lived in body. And, I mean, none of your prayer can really help the soul's journey.
True.
There are four main conditions of existence after the final severance with the gross body. Upwards, the immediate incarnation, heaven or hell, and downwards. Upwards, only the spiritually advanced beings go upwards, that is, beyond and above the lunar sphere. There they stay until such time as they can reincarnate upon Earth. Since perfection can only be realized in the gross human form. During the interim, however, such advanced beings can and do utilize the bodies of Earth beings to work out a certain type of sanskaras. Immediate reincarnation. Those whose good and bad sanskaras almost balance each other, but not exactly equal, because of if they were, such souls would at once attain to God's realization, reincarnate immediately on earth in human being. So immediate reincarnation where these sanskaras are not balanced. Number three,
Correct.
heaven. The person who has accumulated a large portion of good sanskaras and few bad ones experiences through the subtle body, the state called paradise or heaven. Here, the capacity of enjoyment is increased tenfold, and the sensitivity to suffering as a result of the few bad sanskaras is proportionately diminished. In other words, in this condition, there is practically no suffering at all, but only enjoyment until all good sanskaras are spent. However, the impressions of these sanskaras remain and ultimately impel the soul to take another body on earth. 3b Hell. One who has contracted many bad sanskaras during his earth life experiences after death the state called hell, wherein the susceptibility to suffering is increased tenfold and the capacity for enjoyment is proportionately diminished. In the hell state, there is only suffering, and in all those sanskaras which induced this state are exhausted. The impressions remaining compel the soul to rebirth in a body. Downwards, those who have acquired extremely bad sanskaras resulting from deeds like murder or lust or greed after death go downwards into the region of animal spirits to await a suitable gross form for earthly life. The condition of one who arrives at death through suicide requires special explanation. Such a one goes neither upwards or downwards, neither does he immediately reincarnate, nor pass into heaven or hell. Such spirits remain suspended closer to the earth plane, inasmuch as no entry is possible for them in any of the aforementioned states. Their condition is pitiable in the extreme because they too feel the pull of their sanskaras. But unlike those on earth, they have no gross body in which to fulfill their desires. These are the ones which, in common parlance, we call ghosts or disembodied spirits. It is these spirits whose, whom mediums sometimes contact, and they prove a source of harm as well as good. Sometimes such a spirit tries to possess a human body, which it feels an affinity due to similarity of sanskaras. If, for example, person who is otherwise eligible for the heaven state commits suicide, he remains suspended near the earth plane, and if he comes in contact with a human being, does him no harm. But if one who has his bad sanskaras are eligible for hell dies before time, then he may become a source of harm and pain to those whom he contacts. The relatively good spirits, however, usually seek redress through yogis or they seek to serve a perfect master in the darkness of night. Yet, owing to the karmic law, it takes many cycles for such suspended spirits to have the chance of reincarnating again in human form. Through the aid of the master, the evil spirits run as far as possible from a perfect one. Both good and bad suspended spirits can sometimes work out their sanskaras to a human being if they can find one with similar sanskaras and suitable past karmic connections. However, the ignorant victims of such possessions by a suspended spirit may suffer physically and materially, though spiritually they are benefited to the extent of dispensing with 3 or 4 incarnations. Oh, even if it. Okay. Jai Baba. I think we can discuss and then somebody can take over.
Yeah. So I think all I had to say was take this in a very general sense. Death, Ashok, like Ashok said, those are the three definitive Baba's words on death, because some of this is the author's words on death. Generally, it is all aligned to what Baba has said, except maybe some differences in the way the heaven and hell state are described and as options. And Baba never said upwards and downwards, or at least I have not come across that. So anyway, it's a generally it's still very valid. But then the definitive sources are the two chapters in Listen Humanity and Supplement 19, as Ashok ji correctly pointed out. That's all I would like to comment.
One more thing I read first time
Great.
is here, like for the greed and lust and murder, the human goes to the animal spirit.
Yes, that
That's what
also
strange.
Baba has not
Yeah.
said. Baba
I
has
never
said
read.
Maybe it is there somewhere in some message. Let's dig it out. Maybe in earlier messages or Tiffin lectures or those kind of books, which are. But that's there. I mean, people go back to stone form. Even in Rama's time, there are instances that the Shrap, the story of giving a curse, the soul or the person became
Stone
a
form.
stone, and then
Stone form
Rama
are there.
resurrected them. Yeah.
Yeah, stone
So,
form is there, but I haven't read about the animal.
so that is regression, no? That's there. I mean, you are going back into the cycle. I mean, examples we'll have to
retrogression.
find. Yeah, retrogression,
So
Progression. So that's there.
Baba has said that once you take the human form, it is very, very, very rare that you go down from the human
Yeah.
form.
Yes.
But
So these are
yeah,
very
there
rare
are
cases.
exceptions.
That's right.
There are
Yeah,
exceptions.
that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah. These are exceptions.
yeah.
When the load of reverse sanskaras, are more, and as Karthik said, it's very rare. Acha, if you guys are interested, I have the Listening Humanity pages 120 and 21, but it would take some time, so
No,
you can
I
read
don't
that.
think I don't
Yeah,
think
yeah,
we need to go down to reading the references, because again, we our
yeah, yeah,
focus on
I
Saturday is
agree.
exactly.
more to
But
yeah more to see what the author has to say on Baba and
okay,
make our comments, make our understanding. So we'll not get into
perfect,
that.
perfect.
Is
Yeah,
my
perfect,
It
perfect.
reminds me this message was so universally spread to Hinduism. I remember during my childhood going to people's homes and all that. There used to be a calendar which will show the cycle and it will show the Swarga and the Narak, and there is a person who is putting everybody in a oil bath. Those pictures were there, the hell state and the. It was picturized and put as calendars, and on bottom of it you will have dates and all that, and which you can flip off and as the month changes. So this is something which was this knowledge was so commonly spread across, but now you don't find those, generally put up in homes, for dates. Uh, I mean, this. But I mean, in those days, you will be surprised what is in and all that. But that impression was there. If you do good, you go to Swarga. If you do good, bad, you go to Hila. And now we have the explanation that it is all the state of the mind rather than actual
exactly
places.
exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So I think all cultures, all religions have this the idea of the heaven and the hell. The Bible, the Quran, everybody talks about that. But Baba has pointed out that it's not geography. You're not going anywhere. It's just a state of mind, and it's basically driven by your sanskaras, and you get intensified set of experiences. So all of that she correctly says. She is mentioning the tenfold experience, right? So all the intensification. So as I said, generally I agree with all that is said here. But again, this is not definitive, or this is not Baba's words. Is what we need to keep at the back of mind when we are reading about death. Yeah. So with that, let's get to the next section: training school for saints. Would Sunil you be interested in reading, or Ashish, either one of you?
I can read.
Please go ahead.
Training School for Saints. By April 1927, the recently opened school at Mehrabad, with 10 Indian boys of various castes, was underway, and in July, with the advent of 14 boys from Persia, a special Persian section was added. The usual secular education was given to the boys by accredited teachers who served without pay, while Baba instilled into their minds great spiritual truths. This instruction, which to an outsider might have seemed far beyond the boy's depth, was evidently understood intuitively by them, because by the end of November, the divine spark which Baba had been implanting in their hearts burst into a flame of supernal love which spread throughout the school. In January 1928, one Mohammedan Mohammedan boy of 15, now known as Chota, in bracket little Baba, entered into the superconscious state and remained unconscious of his body for 4 days. Concerning his experience, he writes,
Yeah.
uh, scroll down
Yeah, yeah.
already.
My monitor died. Just hold on. Yeah.
Okay. He writes, one night, after delivering a spiritual scientific discourse, the master said to me, child, have faith and try your best. I will make gold out of you. These words of my beloved master produced a great impression on my mind, quite out of proportion to what one might expect. They were surcharged with spiritual force, and they made me very restless. A great spiritual longing took possession of me, and every waking moment I said to myself, when will this dust of myself turn into gold? A great revolution was effected in me. Both boys and disciples wondered at my changed condition. I myself wondered at it. I could not sleep soundly. All relish for any kind of food vanished. Then one day, in the month of December, while partaking of dinner, I felt a great sensation in my body from the crown of my head to the soles of my feet. Tears rolled down my cheeks, and I could not refrain from crying out loud. Everything around me seemed to whirl and vanish. My blood became extremely hot and heat pierced my body from the inside. Then I swooned. When I regained consciousness, I saw my beloved master sitting near me. I could not help crying. He claimed me and gave me a cup of
He
milk.
calmed me. He calmed me and gave me a cup of milk.
Sorry. He calmed me and gave me a cup of milk. I could not think of anything or anybody but him. I meditated upon him continuously, even in school hours. When I was apparently reading, my heart was with my beloved. Separation from him made me suffer intensely. I was contented only when I was with him. This feeling was divine love, a gift from the Master, the love of which Shams-e-Tabriz, the Sufi poet and mystic, speaks. When Shamsul Haq Tabriz opened the wings of love, it made the angel Gabriel run after him. One day in January 1928, when the Holy Master was imparting spiritual instruction to the boys and disciples, I began to feel that I was losing consciousness, and after blurting out, "Oh Baba," I actually lost it. I became unconscious of everything but the divine form of the master. On the fifth day, my gross consciousness was restored to me. But with its restoration, the master divine from which it should be remembered is not his physical body, did not vanish. Since then, I see it in everything, in everybody, and now enjoy ineffable bliss. Before I attained to my present sublime state, I had often read and heard that this gross world is nothing but Maya in bracket illusion. Now I see for myself that this is really true. God alone is real, all else is unreal.
So, of course, this whole section we read almost multiple chapters of it from in the book Sobs and Throbs just before this. So, we are very familiar with Chota Baba rather. So,
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah. Magic of divine love. Other boys in lesser degrees experience something of this same expansion of consciousness. One particularly arresting story is that of Ali, another Persian boy of 14. From the outset, Ali was deeply drawn to Baba and under his benign influence became one of the most ardent of the youthful devotees. But Ali's father and uncle were not men of spiritual understanding. They easily succumbed, succumbed, succumbed to the rumors which were now rife concerning the school. It was whispered that the boys were being forced to adopt the Zoroastrian faith, that they were being detained at the school against their will, that the food was meager, and other equally groundless accusations. Man is so prone to judge others in terms of his own limitations and to see only the surface circumstances or action. To look beneath appearances to the underlying motive requires a degree of spiritual maturity which few seem to possess. Man in condemning a Christ because he associates with harlots and wine bibbers reveals his own impure state of mind. He cannot imagine how one might choose to make friends with such people and yet remain untainted by their shortcomings. Only when we are in a measure approaching closer to the Christ statue can we comprehend the infinite compassion and pure love which inspires such a one to fulfill his mission to humanity in the way he deems best, regardless of man's petty uh, mind mindness. But
Petty
Ali's
mindedness.
father, yeah, pretty mindedness. But Ali's father quite evidently had not reached that status, for when he saw the profound influence which Baba had upon his son, he immediately suspected something sinister and feared he would lose him to the strange and unpredictable master, who some of his friends assured him was a black magician. So he withdrew Ali from the school and returned with him to Bombay, a 3-hour train journey from Mehrabad. But the magic of divine love was more potent than a father's fear. Ali escaped from his home, where he had been kept under strict guard, and made his way back to his beloved master. But only for a few hours was he permitted to enjoy his union with Baba. The father again appeared, and Ali was once more made a prisoner in his own home. But again he escaped, undergoing severe hardship and trial as he worked his way back to Mehrabad. 4 times he escaped, and 4 times was he forced to return to his home until finally the father became convinced that Baba's influence was not only potent but beneficent. This boy Ali was one of the disciples who came with Baba on his first visit to America. By that time, he was about 18, a dynamic spirit full of spontaneous humor and play, yet with fine dignity and poise, and utterly devoted to his master. In more recent years, Baba has pushed Ali far away from any outer dependence upon him or contact with him, showing how, in the process of spiritual training, he requires his disciples to rely solely upon their inner contact with him. Another saga of child's love. Ahmed Muhammad, a little boy of 10, was another whose love for Baba manifested itself in most dramatic way. He was removed from the school at the same time as Ali, though by every means his parents and relatives tried to reconcile him to the separation from Baba. The little chap continued to yearn for his beloved master to such a degree that after 4 months of living at home, he suddenly determined to make his way back to Merabad. Without bedding roll, food, or money, he started on foot for his destination. He managed to sell three silver buttons in his shirt for three annas, about 8 cents, a few of which he paid out for a short train journey, which would take him quickly out of range of his family or friends. Then he proceeded to tramp across the country in the scorching Indian sun. By the time he had walked about 14 miles, it was nightfall and he found himself out in the open country. Muscle weary, he climbed up into a large tree which he thought would be safer than the ground. There he tried to rest, stretch out on the some broad limbs, but since the Indian nights are cool in winter and he was without covering, his sleep was very fitful. At dawn, he resumed his journey. Having only 2 annas left, he knew his breakfast must be slim, so he satisfied himself with few cold biscuits and a handful of water. At a village, an innkeeper took pity on the bedraggled little boy and offered to secure transportation for him in one of the passing motor buses. But Ahmed feared he might encounter someone who knew him and who would report having seen him to his family. So he refused the offer and continued his way on foot. At noon, he spent another few coins for some sweets and rested a little while under the shade of tree. As he was hiking along the road, a European motorist gave him a lift to Pune, which considerably shortened his journey. His evening meal consisted of a handful of nuts for which he spent his last money. That night, he tried first to sleep on bench beside the public road, but the cold winds sent shivers through his poorly protected body. Later, he curled up in the corner of a building and managed to doze a little. The next morning, being in the night neighborhood of Babajan, his master's master, Ahmed stopped off to pay his respect to her. She appeared to be sleeping with her head under a shawl when the boy reached her. So he tiptoed softly and went within a few feet from her. He bowed reverently before her prostrate form. At the moment, Babajan's beautiful snow uh, white head emerged from its covering and, peering directly at Ahmed, gave him a look of melting love which sent a thrill delight through the little fellow's being. Feeling recharged by the contact with her loving presence, he proceeded on his journey. At noon, an old man offered him some bread and chutney, which the boy gladly accepted, as this was the first substantial food he had eaten in 48 hours. That night, upon the old man's advice, Ahmed took shelter in the village mosque, but since it was cold, he slept but little. The next day, he subsisted on the fruit and leaves of the tamarind trees which grew along the road. After walking 16 miles, he felt exhausted from both fatigue and hunger. So he rested a short while. Then, with sheer force of will, he hiked for another 6 miles until he reached a railway station. Here he tried again to rest, but the fire of hunger now raged within him so fiercely that he was driven to beg for food. He approached a Mohammedan who led him to the railway station restaurant and ordered rice and curry for him. But the boy, thinking the curry would contain the meat, the eating of which would have violated Baba's order, said he preferred only tea and bread. Later, his hunger somewhat appeased and his body relaxed, he fell into sound sleep on the station bench until an officious policeman awakened him and drove him away from the station. The remainder of the night he passed under staircase. Here he was comforted by his master's presence in a dream. The following day he walked from dawn to sundown without food and little rest. At another railway station, an old lady on the platform shared with him an unsolicited meal. That night, he ventured again to take refuge in a railway station, and this time was undisturbed. On the sixth day, he started his journey at daybreak. This time, he fed himself on jawari plants in the passing fields, eating as he walked. For now, he knew himself to be within a short distance from his goal, Mehrabad. Once more, he begged not for food but for flowers to be given as an offering to his master. This was Baba's neighborhood, where he is held in a great reverence by the country folk. In response to boy's request, a gardener eagerly presented him with the armful of roses. Sitting by the road, the child used some of the flowers to wave a crown for the king of his heart. A little while later, a haggard and hollow-eyed little fellow was placing his offering upon his master's head. Thus was completed another saga of child's love for Baba, the master. We in the West, who knows too pitifully little of higher states of consciousness, may think we have disposed of such phenomenon as a magnetic drawing of these children to Baba when we apply to it the psychological term of fixation. Even if we granted this, what have what have we explained? What do we actually know of the tremendous motivation which must inspire a child to undergo such a severe hardship and suffering? Certainly, no merely human desire, however intense, would induce small boy to forego sleep and food for 6 days, while compelling his body to undergo the rigorous ordeal of walking 14 to 20 miles a day, in spite of any possible prejudices. Such incidents compel the admission that Baba is certainly no ordinary man to be measured by the usually intellectual yardstick. While in India, I met number of these schoolboys now grown into manhood and wholly dedicated to their master's service for the sake of those who quite sincerely may think that such spiritual upheaval as Baba caused in these young lives might be distress in the latter effect. I can say with equal sincerity that I have never met men more normal or finally balanced mentally and emotionally.
Finely
The
balanced.
impressions, yeah, the impressions of European disciple Mr. Seelek, who lived at Merashram during these days, illumine this phase of Baba's work. The master's love knows no bounds. One must see him among his ashram boys to understand the tie of affinity which exists between Baba and his pupils. How touching is it is to watch this Eurychanes crowd around him when he's in their dormitory, they rush from their beds to embrace him, placing their tiny arms around his waist, while Baba, playing with them, teasing them gently, fills their hearts with childish glee.
So again,
Turning
this part also focuses completely on Sobs and Throbs, Ahmed Muhammad, and his story. Yeah.
turning westward. In March 1928, Baba laid his first cable to the west when he sent his disciple Rustam Irani to England for the ostensible purpose of bringing back some English boys for his school. But Rustam found little response in England to the idea of English boys attending a school in India conducted by native. Even less were the authorities interested in the spiritual aspect of the school, which Rustam described to them. He did his best, but this phase of his mission was destined for failure. A cable from Baba ordered him to return. It was dismal 6 weeks visit made 6 weeks visit made additionally trying by the fact that Rustam had been directed by Baba to eat only bread, butter, and tea while in the West. This diet in a cold, wet spring in England, especially for one accustomed to the tropics, must have been anything but heartwarming. But the darkest hour of Rustam's disappointment was highlighted for him by one experience of singular significance. He received one day a peculiar letter, postmarked Portsmouth, in which the writer, Mr. X, acknowledged the receipt of Rustam's message requesting an interview. Not only had Rustam not sent him a message, he had never heard of the man. He concluded that it was a mistake in delivery and got in touch with all the Iranis in London, but none of them claimed the message as theirs. Curious Rustam felt impelled to travel to Portsmouth to the given address. Mr. X met him at the door and said that her husband was expecting him. When the formalities of introduction were over, the man dimmed the light in the room and began to talk as though he were receiving a message on a wireless set, although nothing of the sort was visible. In a low and impressive voice, he informed his astonished visitor, I see the master. I see the master. It is 2 o'clock in the morning in India. Then he described exactly the master's hut near the ashram. Other Eastern masters of his plane, he concluded, are not easily accessible. They don't care to be disturbed at such an hour, but he's of a very loving nature. I have just told him that the authorities will not allow the boys to be taken to India, but the master replies that there is no power on earth that can stand in the wake of his work. He does not, uh, he does not, however, really want these boys. He wanted to lay the first spiritual cable between the East and West. Up to now, the East has been under the supervision of Eastern masters and West by Western masters. He now wants to merge this division, and that is the real reason why he sent you here. You are carrying without. In the bracket, Mr. is requested that his identity remain undisclosed.
Yeah, Kish,
You
if you see Baba's parentage from Iran, and if you see the map, that also is between the west and the east typically. So that's in the center. I mean that what you wrote the last couple of sentences just gave me this.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
East,
No other
Baba
avatar
connecting the
has
east
done
and
so
west.
much
Yeah.
for bringing the
Yeah.
East and West together.
this statement is you are being aware of it, a sort of wireless connection, and it affects all those who you meet. So next is retirement at a Tiger Valley. In January 1929, about a year and a half after its inception, the first steps were taken for the disbanding of the school phase of Mehrasham. And in April of that year, Baba journeyed with a few of his mandali to Panchgani, a hill resort about 200 miles from Bombay. While there, Baba decided to go into retirement and directed some of the disciples, together with the paid laborers, to dig a cave 15 feet deep on a hilltop in Tiger Valley near Panchgani. This valley, as the name suggests, it infested with tigers and leopards. The latter may often be seen crossing fields and public roads, even in Pasgani itself. One evening, some people saw a leopard following the same track which one of Baba's men had taken but a few minutes before. No mishap occurred, however. The disciple only heard of it later from the townspeople. The only protection which the Mandali had against these marauders at night was a bamboo stick, which Baba told them all to keep nearby, and a hurricane lamp, which they kept outside their huts. The door of the hut occupied by the disciple on duty was kept slightly open a few inches in order to enable him to see any person or animal approaching their locality. In such circumstances, anyone on duty was instructed to alarm the others by striking the kerosene lamp with bamboo stick. The disciples relate that this did not seem to them a very adequate safeguard from fierce nocturnal prowlers.
Nocturnal prowlers.
Thus passed an anxious fortnight for the Mandali when suddenly one night at 8 o'clock Baba called his men together and told them he must leave immediately because his particular work had been accomplished. The fasting and seclusion which Baba had been observing at Tiger Valley continued for 3 months at Mehrabad. Concerning this periodic fasting, Baba said that when a perfect master fasts, it tantamount uh, to all people of the world fasting because he's in them all, and it affects spiritual benefits for the whole of mankind. Western disciples at Tiger Valley. To this cave, which he had blessed with his presence, Baba sent two of his Indian men, Behramji, for 21 days on severe fast of water only, and Pleader, who had for some time been fasting and observing silence. Then, some years later, when the Western group were with Baba in Nasik, he spent Garrett Ford, our dear friend from Hollywood, to stay in the cave for 2 nights. This episode was not without its humorous side. Chanji, Baba secretly at that time was appointed to accompany Gary to the cave and lock him in for the night. Garrett heard soft padding of feet all around the cave and sometimes from the distance other sounds which he was sure must have emanated from the stripped and spotted throats. However, he felt fairly secure, locked within the cave from which Chanji would release him in the morning. So he settled himself down for a night of repose. Then he heard strange scrapings and patterings in his nice secure well. He lighted his lantern and looked around. The place was infested with every species of small animal life. Mice campered merrily about, played hide and seek, beetles crackled and buzzed, ants of all varieties, hues and magnitudes built their miniature miniature words just as his feet. Mosquitoes reminded him of his boyhood days in New Jersey, and roaches came closer to his fastidious person than they had ever before been permitted. He spent most of the night making a mental list of all sprays and powders which he would purchase the next day when he descended to the village below. True to his resolution, he returned to the cave the next night, armed with everything which the town afforded as a protection against the pests, powder guns, liquid sprays, citronella, and incense. Again, he was locked in the cave for the night. He lit his lantern and undid the packages. Then he looked around. There was no sign of even the tiniest ant. He sat on the roughly constructed cot and watched as he quietly waited for the onslaught which he expected would shortly begin. But not a moving thing appeared. After meditation for a while, he inspected the cave again and finding it as a free from vermin as his immaculate home as a Beverly Hills, he fell asleep. He was awakened in the morning by Chanji banging the door. Together they returned to Nashik. When told of his experience, Baba laughed heartily. In contrast to this was the experience of the one Western woman, Elizabeth Patterson, who a few years later, while staying at Pachgani with Baba and his group, spent a night in the same cave. Earnestly, she had asked Baba if she might spend a night in the cave, and he had promised her that she might, but that he would set the time. Some weeks elapsed with no further mention of it by Baba, so Elizabeth reminded him of his promise. Smilingly, he asked, "Do you wish to go now or wait until the time is right?" A few days later, Baba told her that the time had come for her to go to the cave, and he instructed her to remain for precisely 12 hours. Baba and woman disciples accompanied her to the cave, and at 6 p.m., exactly, Baba locked her in a handing her the key through the iron grating. She says that the last thing she remembered before being left alone for the night was Baba's hand extended through the iron bars, resting upon her head for a moment as if in the blessings. As the group disappeared around the bend of the road, profound stillness surrounded her. The fleeting thoughts which passed through her mind she controlled by applying instructions which Baba had given her. She was to concentrate throughout the night. Exactly at 10 minutes before 7, she lit her lantern as Baba had ordered. As she prepared to concentrate, she heard heavy thuds like steps approaching on the path, and she waited anxiously for something to appear. But the sound, though close, gradually diminished, and she concluded that it was perhaps a cow or buffalo which had been grazing on the mountainside. Through the cave opening, she could see four stars in the shape of a kite resembling a southern cross, which stood out more than the others. Brilliantly than the others. Suddenly, a shock like electricity passed through her body from head to foot. It continued in waves of undulating currents and became so strong that 2 or 3 times it seemed to lift her as though it were a rushing wind. Then she felt herself swinging into space with a blanket swaying unevenly beneath her. She thought it only if only she could remain on it as if on a magic carpet, she would be carried along safely, but she rocked so violently that she was impelled to call Baba's name. Immediately the rocking subsided. Immediately the rocking subsided. Later, when the projection into space ceased, she found herself with hands and arms crossed upon her chest. They were so numb that it was some time before she could move them. Considerable time had seemingly elapsed. Then she heard the sound of voices, which she recognized as those of her friends. They appeared inside the cave and called her that it was a 5 o'clock and that they had been sent to summon her. But she recalled Baba telling her not to leave the cave until 6 a.m. sharp. Wondering what she should do, she decided to do what Baba himself had told her. At that moment, he appeared, gleaming into in the entrance. Brilliant light flooded the cave. Seemingly, he answered her mental query. Do as I said, do not leave until 6. When she looked at her watch, it was almost 6 o'clock. As she rose, preparing to leave the cave, daylight was faintly penetrating the iron bars. She felt refreshed and invigorated. On her return to their bungalow, she asked Baba if she had dreamed these experiences, to which she explained that she had been neither asleep nor awake, but in a borderline state of consciousness. You actually experience those things physically. Later, you will understand their full meanings. In the succeeding months following Baba's return to Mehrabad from Tiger Valley, he visited a dozen or more places, fasting at times and occasionally in seclusion.
Okay. I think we can stop here. The next one is Journey into Kashmir. Right? Any other thoughts or comments before we continue? I mean, before we
Yeah,
wrap up for the day?
couple of thoughts. One thing is that the last reading that we do, I think we can think of a plan. Everybody coming over to Pune, then we can spend a day in Pune, go to Panchgani and Mahabaleshwar for 1.5 days, and then we come back to Mehrabad, and from there we disperse. So this is just the initial thought, which as a
Uh,
group we can work
how
around.
how far
Arrange.
how far in terms of time is all of this?
Pune to Panchgani may take maybe 3 hours max,
Okay,
two and a
that's
half,
all.
3 hours.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not very
Okay.
far. And then on the way, we can also see the spot where Baba had the accident, the Satara accident.
Satara. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, that spot is also there in marked. So, and one day in Pune would be great to see the Baba's, of course, birthplace, Pumpkin House, Babajan Chowk, and the memorial at Guru Prasad. So
Yeah.
we can fix the itinerary, something of that type. Yeah, and Ashok can host us in Pune. Other thing that I wanted to convey was the new Glow is in, and it has a page which talks about the messages on remembering his name.
Hmm.
There are very beautiful quotes of money, and there is a pickup from Lord Mayor and some of the people who have talked about this. One of them I just posted on the Telegram. There is a message from money. This it may take a minute to read, but if you permit, yeah.
Please go
This
ahead.
is the spring. Yeah, this is the springtide of creation, when you should gather as much of his remembrance and his name as you can. As Kabir says in one of my favorite stanzas, God's name is here for the looting. There is so much of it. Ram Naam ki loot hai. That's the word in Kabir's uh, poetry. It's like apple season when the ground is covered with apples. You think then they will always be there, but they won't. The season of plenty goes and another season comes. This is the time. This is the season for gathering his remembrance. So we must make most of it. We must acquire the habit of remembering him. That habit will stand us in good stead even when we are born again. Baba has made it clear that in our next birth, we pick up from where we left off this last time. So it is for us to make our relationship with him, our love, our obedience, our surrender to him as complete as we can, so that we can pick up from there next time. Money. That's picked messages from the Joyous Path by Heather Nadel book. So there are many other messages. We can't read everything here, but and there is also uh, Ramju Abdullah's diaries. There is a long, maybe about 10 pages lecture has
Excerpt
come,
from that.
and there is
Okay.
yeah, and there is a long interview of Murshid Lambert Walker, uh,
Oh,
which
okay.
is interesting. Yeah, and there is one book which is written by Joss Keating on Francis being determined to be his. So there is one good chapter, 3 pages on him. So just to create interest, if somebody wants any of these topics to be taken. Jai
Yeah,
Baba.
I don't have access to it, but yeah, I look forward to reading it soon. Jai
Yeah,
Baba. Jai Baba,
Jai Baba.
everybody. I'll stop recording.